Hello, I'm Shreya Kulkarni, and I'm here to share what I learned in my embedded systems internship at Emoji. We began with C programming and then we moved on to embedded system basics. So, in the C programming classes, we saw that C is a middle level language, and there are four types of number systems for the data representation. Those are binary, octal, decimal, and hexadecimal. In binary number system, the base is 2. In octal, it's 8. In decimal, it is 10. And in hexadecimal, it's 16. So in binary, we only have two numbers, zeros and ones. In octal, we have 8 values, 0 to 7. In decimal, we have 10, which is 0 to 9. And in hexadecimal, we have 16. 16 includes 0 to 9 from decimal, and for 10 to 15 we use the letter representations A to F. So A corresponds to 10 and F corresponds to 15. Next, we moved on to data types and modifiers. So the data types that are available in C are int, char, float, double, signed, and unsigned. In int, you can store any integer, positive, negative, it doesn't matter. In char, we can store a single character. So the main thing, the difference between char and string is that char is a single character and it should be enclosed in a single quote. And for strings, we will use double quotations. Next is float. Float is used for storing the decimal values, fractional values, etc. Double is used for storing floating point again, but the resolution is more. Then signed and unsigned. In signed integers, you can have both positive as well as negative integers, but in unsigned int, the entire range that we have for integer, that is 4 byte, the entire range is taken for storing only positive numbers. So, for example, age can be unsigned integer, and maybe something else, some range can be signed integer. Then we moved on to operators. In operators, we saw arithmetic, logical, relational, and bitwise. Arithmetic includes plus, minus, multiplication, division, etc. And relational includes less than, greater than, then equal to, not equal to, etc. Then logical is not, and, or. Then bitwise operators, bitwise and, bitwise or, XOR, etc. Then we moved on to the control structures. In control structures, we saw if else, which is branching, then switch, which makes it easier to use if else if there are too many else ifs. So, switch can be used to simplify our code, and loops for, while, and do while. Then we moved on to data structures, which are arrays, etc. So in arrays, we saw how the storage is being done, like consecutive blocks of memory is done. So memory allocation in arrays. Then we looked at indexing, forward indexing from 0 to n minus 1, etc. Then we also saw how to declare functions, define functions, difference between declaration and definition, call and recursion. Next, we moved on to advanced C, where we learned about pointers. Pointers are used for address handling, referencing and dereferencing, and in functions how we pass an element by value or by reference. And then we looked at pointer data type, etc., null pointer, wild pointer, etc. Then we moved on to strings. Strings are character arrays, and uh, the difference between character array and string literals. We also saw the difference between character array and string literals. So, character array is like a mutable string, like you can modify a particular index in the string, but in string literals, you can't directly go and modify a specific index if you want to. So these were some of the differences between character array and string. Then we looked at some of the standard string functions like strlen, strcopy, which is used for copying, strcmp, which is for comparison, strcat, which is for concatenation. Then we looked at storage classes, auto, static, register, extern. All these concepts help us to use variables declared in one file in the other file, etc. So here we learnt about something called scope of the variable, like the place where the variable is accessible is called its scope. Then lifetime of the variable, memory segments. Stack and heap are two memory segments. So whenever any recursive function is called, it the memory segment is in the stack. Heap memory is used for dynamic allocation. Then we also looked at preprocessor directives. So hash include, hash define. Then hash define is used for macros. Then conditional compilation, etc. Function like macros. So if we want to write a very small function, we need not write it in def, I mean inside the file, but we can write it as a preprocessor directive. So we learned the C programming concepts which are required for our embedded systems, uh, microcontroller programming. Then we looked at what is an embedded system and what is the difference between a general purpose system, GPS, and an embedded system. So, embedded system is like hardware plus software which is used to do a particular task. It is designed to perform a specific task. It has a dedicated function and it's not used for general purposes. Whereas general purpose systems are systems which are used to develop the embedded system itself. So let us look at some examples to get this clear. Embedded systems, example could be washing machine or microwave oven, which are used for specific purposes like washing clothes or for cooking food, etc. But general purpose system can be laptop or desktop, phone, etc. It's not used for one single purpose, but it has various purposes. So laptop is used for developing embedded system itself. So we can code in the laptop and get our embedded system working. So yeah. Then we also looked at the categories of embedded systems. So there are 4 or 5 categories of embedded system. So first is the standalone system. Standalone system is like it takes its own decisions. Example is self-driven car. So it does not need any other external device to tell it what to do. Like there's no instruction, there's no master slave type over here. It takes its own decision. So example is self-driven car. And the second category in standalone systems itself is master slave type, which follows instructions blindly. It does not have its own intelligent thinking. It just it's pre-programmed basically. So example can be semi-automatic washing machine. So whatever the user has defined uh, in the washing machine embedded system, it just follows that. Next is real-time embedded system. In real-time embedded system also there are many types. So hard real-time embedded system, then soft real-time embedded system, firm real-time embedded system. We'll be looking at each one of it in the later slides. Then is networked embedded system. In networked embedded system, multiple embedded systems are connected and data exchange happens between those systems. Next is mobile embedded system, where it is a portable embedded system and it can be moved from one place to another. For example, mobile phone can be an example of this kind of embedded system where you can move it from one place to another. It's not connected physically, so you can take it to different places. So, in the types of real time embedded systems that we saw in the previous slide, we have hard real time system, firm real time system, and soft real time system. In hard real time system, human life is involved, so the deadlines must be met critically. So, there is no chance for failure in this kind of embedded system. For example, if a skydiver is jumping from the top, he needs a parachute. So if the parachute doesn't open in time, then the life is at risk. So example could be airbag system. In airbag system, if an accident is happening, the airbag should open or inflate within time. If that doesn't happen, if the deadline is not met, then the life is lost. Then there's no purpose of the airbag opening later. So hard real time systems have a hard and fast deadline. And next we have firm real time system. In this, human life is not in danger. In this, life is not in danger, but money is in danger. For example, money is at risk. So if a space rover is landing on the moon or maybe on some other planet like Mars, if there is some issue in that, if there is some delay in that, then the cost is affected. For example, maybe more fuel is required if there's a delay in landing. So yeah, the money and the property is at risk, but the cost, like the life, is not at risk. So occasional miss is allowed, but still the deadline is important here. Soft real time system here, no damages will happen even if the deadline is not met. For example, if you are setting your washing machine to run for half an hour and it runs for 40 minutes, 10 minutes is not a big loss, and there is uh, nothing much that is happening. There's no money involved, there's no life that is at risk. So here deadline tolerance is there. Next, we will move on to components of an embedded system. So, an embedded system is made up of these six components. First is the microcontroller or the microprocessor. Then we have memory. Then sensors and actuators. This is the input and the output. And ADC, which stands for analog to digital converter. DAC, which stands for digital to analog converter. Human interfaces. Then power and auxiliary systems. So first is the processing unit, and the processing unit can be microcontroller, microprocessor, or system on chip. All these things depend on the complexity of the system. And for simple applications, we can go for microcontroller or microprocessor, and for complex ones, we'll go for system on chip. Next, we have memory. In memory, we have two types actually, RAM and ROM. In ROM, we have this EEPROM. Okay. So RAM stands for random access memory and ROM stands for read only memory. In RAM, we can read and write infinite number of times, and in ROM, it is read only memory. So you can read many times, but you can write only once. So that once is during the manufacturing. And RAM is like volatile memory. It needs continuous power supply to retain the data. ROM is non-volatile memory. It does not require power supply to retain the data. So whatever is stored once, it is stored kind of permanently till the lifetime of the memory element. Then we will be looking at the types of memory in the later slides. Then we have sensors and actuators. Sensors are used for sensing the physical parameters of the environment. For example, to measure the temperature, we will be using temperature sensor. To measure the humidity, we'll be using humidity sensor, etc. So these signals are analog in nature, and to convert it to digital signals, we'll be using ADC, which is analog to digital converter, because our embedded system can understand digital signals, not analog signals. And the physical world is in analog format, so whenever we are giving output to the world, that time we'll be using digital to analog converter, because the microcontroller or the embedded system produces a digital output, and that needs to be converted to analog to make it into a usable format. Then we have actuators. Actuators are like the output devices like motors, etc. So these motors will run on the analog signal given by the DAC, digital to analog converter. Next, we have human interfaces. So these could be like maybe matrix keypad could be one example where human is interacting with the system using some device. For example, buttons. The simplest example could be a button, switch, etc. Then the more complicated examples could be matrix keypad, etc. Then we have power and auxiliary systems. Power and auxiliary systems are the VCC, ground. These are just the power supply needed to get our embedded system working. We'll be looking at microprocessor versus microcontroller. We'll be discussing the differences between the two. So microprocessor is just the processing unit. So CPU only on a chip. But the microcontroller includes processing unit, which is the microprocessor, plus memory, plus input and output on a single chip. So microcontroller has much more facilities or much more features than microprocessor. So if we are using a microprocessor, we need external memory in the form of RAM or ROM, and then input output pins also. Everything is required externally. But for microcontroller, everything is there on one single chip. So here the difference is given: on chip RAM, ROM, timers, ADC, IO, etc. IO stands for input output. Then microprocessor has higher power consumption, because when once we are using the external memory, external chips, then for each element we'll have to give a power supply, so higher power consumption. But on a microcontroller, it's overall it's having a lower power consumption. Then microprocessor has higher system cost, microcontroller has low system cost, because you will have to purchase each and every element individually in microprocessor's case. But for microcontroller, everything is already there. And microprocessor, it has a complex hardware design, and microcontroller has a simple hardware design, because everything is prefixed. So memory is like 8 bit or 16 bit, everything is fixed. In complex hardware design, here things are not fixed, so your microprocessor should be able to handle all kinds of uh, elements that are added with it. Microprocessor is used for general purpose computing, because purpose is not fixed and it has more flexibility. In microcontroller, this is used for dedicated control tasks. It has lesser flexibility than microprocessor. Microprocessor has a higher processing speed, and microcontroller has a moderate processing speed. Microprocessor requires external peripherals. These peripherals mean the memory, input, output devices, etc. And microcontroller has built-in peripherals, like even the LED is present on the microcontroller itself. Okay, microprocessor again. Microprocessor is flexible but complex in design. Microcontroller is giving us lesser flexibility, but it has a lower cost and lower complexity. So the types of memory in embedded system. We had discussed previously about the two types, RAM and ROM, where RAM is the random access memory, ROM is the read-only memory. Now we'll be looking at the types of ROM, that is the read-only memory. Masked ROM. This is used to store the important data like manufacturing date, chip ID, etc. So these are programmed during manufacturing. Next is PROM, which is programmable read-only memory, or OTPROM, that is one-time programmable read-only memory. So it can be programmed once by the user. So even masked ROM is programmed, but it is programmed by the company during manufacturing. But the difference between masked ROM and PROM is that programmable read-only memory is programmed once, but it is by the user. Next is UV EEPROM, which is UV erasable programmable read-only memory. So using UV light, we can erase and reprogram the read-only memory. Then we have hybrid memories, which are between RAM and ROM. So we have EEPROM, which is electrically erasable read-only memory. So using electrical signals, we can erase the memory stored in this. So byte-wise erasing is possible. Then we have flash memory. Here it is not byte-wise, but it is block-wise erasing, and so it is faster than EEPROM. So there are two kinds of flash memory. One is NOR flash and the other one is NAND flash. So NAND flash is like non-volatile memory. You can read and write infinite number of times. And NOR flash is again non-volatile memory, and you can read and write infinite number of times, but this has byte accessibility, and in the NAND one we have block accessibility. These are the main differences between NOR and NAND. NAND has block-wise data storage, and NOR has byte-wise data storage. The main requirements of an embedded system is that it should be reliable, it should be cost effective, it should have a low power consumption, efficient CPU and memory usage. So this is one of the main reason why we go for microcontroller over microprocessor, and we go for microprocessor only in case when we have very sophisticated requirements, like when the complexity is more, we go for microprocessor, but when it is a simple requirement, cost effectiveness, low power consumption, all these things point towards the microcontroller and not the microprocessor. So, formally, what is a microcontroller? A microcontroller is a programmable integrated circuit, which is IC. It is designed for specific control tasks. It has a limited memory, and if additional memory is required, we can use external memories as well. And then IO is input output. All peripherals are present on a single chip. Later, we moved on to general architectures where we learned about von Neumann architecture and Harvard architecture. These are the general architectures for any microcontroller. And then we moved on to the specific architecture. Like in our internship, we used a microcontroller called PIC microcontroller, which is PIC 16F877A. The specific one is PIC 16F877A. For this particular microcontroller, we looked at its architecture. So in the architecture, we saw that we have 5 IO ports. Then we had uh, three timers. First timer is timer 0, second one is timer 1, and then we had timer 2. Then ADC, EEPROM, UART, I2C, and SPI. These are the communication protocols, and this is widely used. This particular microcontroller is widely used for learning embedded systems. Then we looked at the input output interfaces, IO interfaces. So these are the interfaces through which the microcontroller receives or sends signals. So it can receive the signal from the physical environment, and it can send signal to the outer world. So the signal that is received can be digital or analog, and if it's analog, then it's converted to digital using ADC. Then this is used for sensing and basic control. It's directly connected to the MCU, means microcontroller unit pins. So the examples of these interfaces could be push buttons, keypads, LEDs. LEDs come for the output, push buttons are like input, keypad is also input. Then LCD display is for output, and sensors are for sensing the physical parameters like temperature, light, etc. Then for the output side, we moved on to actuators. Actuators are the devices that convert electrical signals into physical signals. Like, for example, converting electrical energy to mechanical energy, mechanical movement. That mechanical energy can be in the form of movement, force, or motion. This is usually required in real life. For example, if you want to switch on a motor, then we need an actuator. So for example, if the water level is below a certain threshold, you want to automatically switch on the water motor. So this can be done with the help of actuators, and here we require driver circuits. Examples are DC motors, servo motors, stepper motors, relays, and solenoids. So next we moved on to interfaces overview, where we looked at how to program LEDs, digital keypads, and what are interrupts, then timers, LCD, etc. LCD stands for liquid crystal display. LEDs are the light emitting diodes. LED interfacing, we began by writing a simple program to make an LED blink. Then LED is the most simple output device. If we learn how to do one output device, the other ones are similar, so it's easier. So next input output device that we worked on is fan. So in our project, we worked on the fan. Then forward biased to glow. This is a specific feature for LED. So LED is a diode, so only if it's forward biased, it will glow. Then this is used for checking the system status, debugging, etc. So if you want to see if a particular interrupt flag is raised or not, then you can use it then you can program the LED in such a way to show its status. So the LEDs are connected to port B and port D. This can be seen in the architecture. So the LEDs are connected to port B and port D. Next, we looked at digital keypad. So the digital keypad that we had in our microcontroller is a matrix keypad which has 4 rows and 3 columns. So these include 1 to 9, numbers from 1 to 9, and then in the bottom row we had hash, 0 and star. Okay. So the digital keypad is used for getting the user input. These use tactile switches and pull up and pull down resistors. This issue that is present with the digital keypad is, or any switch in general, is switch bouncing. We'll be looking at that in the upcoming slides. Next, we moved on to pull up and pull down circuits. So in a pull up circuit, the circuit is initially connected to the higher voltage. So it's, as you can see here, the flag that is present here, the netlist is connected to VCC, which is 5 volts. And when the switch is pressed, momentarily it gets connected to the ground. And for a pull down circuit, it's the opposite. The circuit is initially connected to ground, and when the switch is pressed, it gets momentarily connected to the VCC or the higher voltage, 5 volts in this case. So the purpose of pull up or pull down circuits is that it ensures that defined logic level is still present when the input pin isn't floating. Floating here means that the switch is not pressed. So in not pressed condition also, the input pin has some value. This prevents false triggering due to noise. For example, if it's not connected to ground, then maybe there's some other voltage that is sensed by this, and that is due to noise. So that false triggering should not happen, and that should not affect our circuit. So pull up resistor is connected between the input pin and the VCC, as you can see here, and the default logic level is high. Sorry, when the switch is pressed, the default logic level, when the switch is pressed, the input is pulled to ground. It is commonly used in digital keypad and buttons. So pull down resistor, the resistor is connected between the input pin here and the ground. So when the switch is pressed momentarily, it gets connected to the VCC. Default logic level is low. So based on the default logic level, we define if it's pull up or pull down. If it's VCC, then we say pull up. If its default level is ground, then we say pull down. So when the in the pull down case, when the switch is pressed, the input gets pulled to VCC. Then we moved on to level and edge triggering of a switch. So level triggering of a switch happens when the event is detected as long as the signal remains at a particular logic level. So if you are increasing your volume of the TV, so as long as you have pressed the plus button, it keeps increasing. You need not press again and again for increasing, like from 10 to 11, 11 to 12. You need not press it 10 times or 12 times if you want to increase it from 10 to 20 or 10 to 22. So here level triggering is used. Can be active high or active low. So it can either detect the active high position, active high level, or active low level. So the microcontroller continuously senses the input. Example over here is button pressed, input remains high, and the action repeats until it is released. So if you are increasing the volume, you would want it to increase continuously, and you need not press the button 10 times to increase it by 10 units. So advantage of this is that it's simple to implement compared to the edge triggering, and it is suitable for steady state signals. The disadvantage is that repeated triggering if the switch is held. This can be considered as an advantage or a disadvantage. For example, it depends on what we want. If we want to increase the volume, then level triggering is preferred over edge triggering. But if you want to switch on or switch off the TV, if you press it once and you hold it for a particular period, you don't want your TV to switch on, switch off, switch on, switch off. You don't want that thing to happen. So for that, you will go to edge triggering. This can be considered as an advantage as well as disadvantage. Okay, so this is for edge triggering. In edge triggering, the event is detected only during a transition. So in this, you can see this is the transition, either from low to high or from high to low. This is called the rising edge and this is called the falling edge. So here in edge triggering, the event is detected only during the transition of the signal. The types given here are rising edge and falling edge. Rising edge is from low to high, rise in value. Then falling edge is from high to low, fall in value. So trigger occurs once per transition. If the button is pressed continuously, then the button press is detected only at press or release moment. So if you want to detect it at press moment, it depends on what you're using, pull up or pull down. So uh, for either a falling edge or a rising edge, it is detected. The advantage of this is that there is no repeated triggering and it is ideal for interrupts. For interrupts, you don't want the interrupt to be generated continuously. You want it to interrupt once and then go to the ISR and come back. So, yeah. Then disadvantages, the designing is slightly complex. Applications of level triggering and edge triggering. For level triggering, we can say that polling based inputs and simple switches can be applications of level triggering. And for edge triggering, interrupts and event driven systems. So, interrupts. What are interrupts? Interrupts are like mechanisms to handle asynchronous events. So, the microcontroller pauses the main execution, executes the ISR, which is the interrupt service routine, and at the end of interrupt service routine, there is a function, uh, there is a keyword called return. So, this returns it back to the normal execution. There are different types of interrupts. There are two types based on the thing, like hardware or software. Then there are two other types in a different classification: maskable interrupt and non-maskable interrupts, internal and external sources. So if it's triggered internally, it's called internal. If it's triggered externally, it's called external. Maskable and non-maskable. So if there is an interrupt which is generated, if it's maskable, then you can program it in such a way that the microcontroller doesn't know that the interrupt was generated in the first place. But if you use non-maskable interrupts, there is no way to hide this from the microcontroller. And hardware and software interrupts, some interrupts can be generated using the hardware and some are generated using the code itself. So in software also, like division by zero can be considered as one of the software interrupts. Then we moved on to timers. Timers are used for counting. So counters can be like an example or application of timers. So hardware counters. Then these are used to measure time delays, generate pulses, and used for PWM and event counting. Some important terminologies in timers is that resolution, quantum, then we have tick and overflow. We'll be looking at each one. So resolution, the number of bits used by the timer register. So it's like a range, number of bits used by the timer register. If it's a 8-bit timer, then it goes from 0 to 2 power 8 minus 1. 2 power 8 is 256, minus 1 is 255. Then if it's a 16-bit timer, it will go from 0 to 65535. This number is 2 power 16 minus 1. Then this determines the maximum count value. So 8-bit timer can count from 0 to 255 and then it will start again from 0 to 255. Then we have quantum. Quantum is the smallest time unit represented by one timer increment. So when the timer goes from 0 to 1, the smallest time unit, it can be like 100 milliseconds or zero point 0.1 millisecond, etc. This is the smallest time unit by one timer increment. This is also called timer clock period. Then we have tick. So single increment or decrement of the timer count is called a tick. So in one tick, how much time is taken is called the quantum. Occurs once every quantum and represents one basic timing step. Okay. So next is overflow. Condition when the timer reaches its maximum count value and resets. So for a 8-bit timer, for example, we have 0 to 255. When it reaches 256, it gets reset to 0. So this is overflow, and this will generate an overflow flag or interrupt. So if you want to count from 0 to say 500, then we will need 0 to 256, sorry, 0 to 255, and then again one more 0 to 255. What we can do is we can have another variable which counts the number of times the overflow flag was raised. So if the overflow flag was raised once, then the next count 255, after that it goes to 0. We can start counting from there. Like we can check the number of cycles and then we can keep increasing the count. Then this overflow generates overflow flag or interrupt. This is used for time delays or periodic events. So if something is periodic, it will repeat after a certain time. And here, for example, using this, we can also change the limits. It need not be 0 to 255. We can set it from 0 to 100 also. So after every 100 ticks, it will start resetting or repeating. So it can be used for periodic events, time measurement also. It can also be used for time measurement. So now we will look at the uh, project, which is our microwave oven project. To run this, we will be clicking on clean and build. This will build the hex file. And now we will be looking at the demo for our microwave oven project. To run this, we will be clicking at this clean and build. So the build is successful and it has created the hex file. So to load, we will be using the PixSimLab simulator. So in the simulator, we have to choose the microcontroller, which is PIC16 F877A in our case. Then file, load hex, and our hex file. So there are four modes of cooking: micro, grill, convection, and start. First, we'll look at the micro. So it shows the power and then it allows you to set the time. We can set the time to 1 hour 30 minutes and then or 1 minute and then enter. Here we can pause the cooking or resume the cooking. We can stop the cooking as well. Next, we'll move on to the next mode, which is grill mode. So in grill mode, we can set the cooking time to 25 seconds and then enter. So it starts down counting. Here also we have the same options: pause, resume, and stop. We'll let this complete. So time up, enjoy your meal. Next, we have the convection mode. In convection mode, we can set the temperature as well. So temperature is capped to 80. So if any temperature is entered beyond 80, sorry, 180, then it will bring it down to the maximum possible temperature, which is 180. So let's enter maybe 56, enter. It will preheat for 60 seconds and then it will ask us to set the time. Okay, so now you can set the time. Let's set the time to 3 minutes and wait, sorry, uh, 30 seconds or 3 seconds is also fine. We'll enter 3 seconds. Time up, enjoy your meal. That's it. Next, we have the start mode, which directly starts. So if we want to increment it by 30, then we will click on 4. Every time we click 4, it gets incremented by 30. If we want to pause, we can click here. If we want to stop, we can click again here. If we want to stop, we can click on 6. So if I want to increase this from 29, if I want again 55, 54. So for incrementing by 30, we will be clicking 4. So that is it. We have checked all the modes. So that is it for the demo. This was our microwave oven project developed using PixSim Lab for the simulation, and microcontroller used is PIC16F877A. Thank you.